Welcome everybody to another episode of the Nerd Continuity, where we talk about design, development, and all other crazy sorts of stuff that we find online. And today online I found another crazy person like me, which is a developer and someone that likes to tinker with open source and Linux and stuff like that. And his name is Chris, and thank you so much for joining this episode of the Nerd Continuity.
Yeah, thank you for having me here, Alex.
Oh, it's a real pleasure. So, who are you? What the hell are you doing here? Why there's another voice in this podcast today?
Yeah, I'm a developer. I've been working for close to 10 years, and just recently started doing YouTube myself. I like full stack development, so I like doing back end all the way through front end because I get just stuck doing one thing, I get bored.
Yes, I totally agree. It's the same exact thing. You get bored after a while, like doing just back end or just front end or just DevOps. You have to diversify it, right? Otherwise it gets repetitive.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that some people really do like doing one thing and they can become an expert in, I'm an expert Node.js developer, and that's a great place for you. But for me, like, if I just did Node.js all day, I would,
yes,
I'd go crazy.
And do you like? That's something that I struggle with, because a lot of people they tell me like, oh, you're good at everything, oh, you know how to do everything, but I always consider myself average on pretty everything because I get like really excited about, I don't know, JavaScript development, and I got into it, and then after a year or less I'm like, oh, this is boring, I want to do something else. So I never actually master that field 100%. I reach like 70-75% and then I'm done. So how's for you? Like, do you go full on a topic and then you switch another one, or you just like chip away from everything?
Yeah, I kind of do a little bit of both. I started a new job earlier in 2017 doing Laravel. It was the first time I'd worked in Laravel, so for the first 6 months I was just watching tons of Laracasts and just trying to get used to PHP and everything. And but on the side, I like to be like, oh, like, let's look at Vue.js. We're not using that at work, but I like to play with that. Or okay, the React community seems strong, I want to see what that's about. And so yeah, I like to play with a lot of things. I feel like once you learn one JavaScript framework, you can just kind of start picking up bits and pieces of another one. You'll never be as good as somebody who just does React, but it's fun.
Yeah, definitely. And I noticed that there are a lot of users, a lot of followers that they keep asking, and maybe you can give some clarity on this also. They keep asking like, what's the best framework I should pick? Or like, is it good if I start learning? I have like no background in JavaScript. Is it good if I start immediately learning React or just Vue.js? And my advice, and you can tell me if you don't agree, of course, but my advice usually is just, if you have zero background, just learn vanilla JavaScript really, really well, especially the new ES6 scripting convention. And then after that, after you learn that you know pretty much everything about it, it doesn't matter the framework, because everything is going to be kind of familiar, and you're going to be able to start working on whatever type of framework and jump between frameworks as well.
Yeah, I agree. Web development these days, there's a new JavaScript framework every day almost.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's annoying.
I can't imagine how hard it is for people that are just getting into web development today, because back in the day you just had HTML, CSS, or even just inline styles, and Hello World was one file. Yeah. And now you've got NPM dependencies, and you've got 400 megabytes of node modules, and it's crazy. So I think learning the fundamentals of just HTML, vanilla JavaScript, CSS, and then just kind of picking up what interests you, because all these frameworks, at the end of the day, they do the same thing, just slightly different.
Yeah, true. That's exactly true. Yeah, I remember, I don't know if you noticed this, I don't know, it feels like the web technologies now, it's all high on cocaine, because I don't know, up until like 5 years ago or 6 years ago, like HTML was stuck at the same level. Like CSS was always CSS 2.0 or 2.1. And for years, it was always like that. No new introductions, no new conventions, not even new markups. And suddenly, the only thing that was kind of advanced was jQuery. And then now, suddenly, once every 3 months, there's a new PHP version release, a new JavaScript version, a new framework, and a new extension of CSS, and then the next CSS, and then there's post CSS, and then the SCSS. So I don't know what happened. Like, did we suddenly get super smart and we figured out like, oh, actually we can do this?
Yeah, I don't know, but new developers don't know the struggle of writing full applications in just jQuery. I mean,
oh my God, yeah, that was a fun time.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it does happen very fast. It's you know, you can't keep up with everything. So
oh yeah, exactly.
Knowing the fundamentals is the biggest thing to be able to help consume all the new technologies that are just being thrown at you daily.
Yes, true. And talking about innovation and new things that are gonna disrupt a little bit the workflow of a lot of people, one of the first topic that we have in this episode of the Nerd Continuity is talking about Guttenberg, the new WordPress editor / plugin / integration / core component, whatever they're gonna call it. It's something that is gonna be released in version 5 of WordPress, the next version. Right now we are 4.9 at the time of this recording, and I have a lot of thoughts about Gutenberg. Did you try it? Do you give it a shot?
Yeah. If you want to try it, you can download a plugin right now. You know, don't do it on a production site.
Yes, good advice.
Yeah. And I have tried it. I really like it. For me, I'm fairly new at WordPress. I've never worked in WordPress professionally as like a job. So I know a lot of developers that have created plugins for things that Gutenberg is now kind of replacing, and they're kind of upset about that. But I think overall, it's going to be a very good move. For those that don't know what Gutenberg is, it's really replacing the content editor of WordPress. So where you're writing your posts, where you're writing your pages, I think the UX is a lot better. Everything. I mean, that WYSIWYG editor in WordPress is
WordPress. WordPress used that TinyMCE extension, that JavaScript library, for like doing this WYSIWYG since version 2.7 or something. So it's been like almost 10 years that it's always on the same platform and same framework. So yeah, it's getting daunting to actually use that thing. Yeah,
and the new Gutenberg, everything is going to be a block. So simple things like your headers and paragraphs are going to be a block, but also if you want to embed a small, I think they have a image gallery where you can say, hey, I want to show these 9 images on 3 columns. So you have like a 3x3 grid of images. You can just plop that in there, and you can easily move them up and down. So I think for average users that are not developers, giving them something like a short code, people are probably like, this is kind of weird. Why am I putting codes in my post, And this is going to make it so that instead of a short code, you can make a new block for this custom thing somebody wants in their theme. And they can just put it in their post, and it looks the way it's supposed to look, as opposed to this weird code with parameters and stuff. So.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, I really like this approach. It's gonna be kind of weird. Like, the first time it was introduced, the community was super divided. It was almost 50-50. Like, someone loved it, someone hated it so much. The fact is that it's a completely different approach, but the main problem that WordPress is trying to solve is exactly what you were talking about, like the ability to write some content for end users that are not developers without the necessity of actually writing code. And we all know that TinyMCE writing code and HTML is just terrible, especially because every time you save the post, I don't know if you ever noticed this, it does strips away some unnecessary HTML. For the software are unnecessary, but for the developers are not. Like, if you put a div that doesn't have any content in it, it's just an empty div, then maybe it's a block style that you put there, it just strips it away. You cannot have break lines like BRs, tags, it just strip them away. So it's just like, does whatever it wants, the TinyMCE. Instead, like Gutenberg, it's it's this new approach that it's way more visual. And I think the inspiration was mostly because when the user wants to build something in WordPress, the first thing that he does is looking for a visual editor, the best visual editor like Elementor or Site Origin and stuff like that. And all these visual editors are great, but there are really few of them that are not super bloated and super heavy on your installation. So WordPress is trying to solve this issue of you don't need to install a gigantic plugin in order to just align two images on your content.
Yes.
Did you hear about all the shenanigans with the license and the source code of how it was
the React
built?
license.
Yeah.
Just
yeah.
People were all freaking out about React not that long ago, and I know Facebook changed the licensing some for React, but was all in on React, and I think, did they switch to Vue?
No, actually, I have no idea. I want to check it, but I know that I talked with a developer a couple of months ago, which like it was really great. Like I met it at a bar here in Vancouver. It was just a total random coincidence. But I started asking him so many questions and he didn't want to answer too much. But he told me that they're trying to do everything to be framework agnostic. So they rewrote a lot of stuff in vanilla JavaScript, just ES6, regular ES6, because they want to give the users the ability to create add-ons, so new generated blocks, in whatever framework you want. So Guttenberg can accept React, can accept Vue.js, can accept vanilla JavaScript and stuff like that. So I'm not sure if they rewrote it completely or because the way... so just a little bit background. Guttenberg was built initially in React, that it's framework developed by Facebook. And the license of React was open source, but was a like slightly modified version of MIT license, which had this little thing at the end as if for whatever reason, some of I don't know, a user, a developer, someone that is using this framework gets in an issue with Facebook with a lawsuit or stuff like that, automatically the license will prevent that user to use that framework and all the other users or developers that were connected to that user. So it was this cascading madness.
And Facebook's got plenty of money for lawyers, so it's
yeah, exactly. And the issue for WordPress is that if a user is using Guttenberg that is built in React and that user is having like a lawsuit with Facebook, cascading, like automatically that lawsuit will repercuss on WordPress because WordPress is using the same framework that the user is using, which is like insane. So yeah, they decided to drop it, and other businesses that were starting to drop React. So Facebook decided to, okay, let's adopt just a regular open source license. Let's not do these shady things. But I don't know if in those 2 months that passed, like actually WordPress started refactoring everything. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting that they're going to allow, I think it's a good idea that they're going to allow Vue and React and kind of anything to work with it, because that really opens it up to any developer that's used to working in their own JavaScript framework to be able to contribute to the Gutenberg, the blocks and everything that you can develop for.
Yes, exactly. What do you think is gonna happen to all those visual editors for WordPress, all those like third-party plugins that they're basically trying to do what Gutenberg is doing?
I don't know. I mean, I would think that it's kind of bad news for them. I think they could probably pivot to building blocks that are, kind of doing what they do now, but do them in the blocks. Which I did see somebody talking about something on Twitter the other day, and it brought up something that kind of made sense to me, was that if you start installing 20 plugins for 20 different blocks you want for your posts and everything, are you loading 20 different CSS styles, or is WordPress going to do something clever to kind of minify them all and put them into like one Gutenberg style sheet?
That's a good point. I didn't think about it. That's a really good point. That never, like WordPress never does that. Never
Yeah.
optimize anything. That's also a huge issue with Jetpack, that it's a plugin developed by the same WordPress developers, by Automatic. And also Jetpack, you have like, it's basically like a massive plugin that has inside many different small features that you can activate and deactivate. But every time you activate a feature, it loads the specific CSS and JavaScript of that feature. So I had in the past websites with 7 or different features related to Jetpack activated, and you have like 16 different HTTP calls to 8 different CSSs and 8 different JavaScript. Nothing is built or like bundled together in one single minified file. So that's a really good point. How insane is gonna get this thing?
Yeah, because these blocks, they might be small and simple, but if you're loading a ton of different style sheets, that could really slow down your site.
Yeah, man, that's a big issue. I think like the editors, like the page editors should like start creating blocks for Gutenberg, or do the things that Gutenberg doesn't do, and it's actually building the full page, because Gutenberg is just for the content of your post. You cannot actually build like the menu or the sidebar or stuff like that. It's just for the content of the page or the post. So these visual editors, probably they should try to make it easier to build the website, but also from that point of view, there's the customizer that WordPress is trying to push with the customizer API that gives that ability to actually customize the look and feel. Do you think WordPress is trying to get rid of all the plugins so far? Like it's trying, has this agenda to, I'm going to destroy all those companies that rely on WordPress?
I don't know. I'm not sure if they're really doing it maliciously, but but maybe just trying to I think there's a lot of people out there that are just running their own WordPress site. They're not developers, and they just see plugins that do all these things, and they just start installing them like crazy, and then they wonder why their site's slow. So maybe it's just a way for WordPress to say, like, look, like if you have a WordPress site, it's going to run fast and you can do all these things, and more straight out of the box, you can design it the way you want.
I think that's the goal, to have like a more complete platform that can compete against like Medium or Ghost or these other platforms that already have like a pretty solid, like you don't need third-party plugins or any integration from a developer in order to have a fully functional and looking good website. And that's what WordPress is trying to do. Like so far, if you don't find a good theme that has a lot of plugins and it's heavily customized, if you have like WordPress out of the box, it's really limited with the things that you can do if you're not a developer. So probably, yes, the approach is appealing to non-developers. There are still a bunch of cons of Gutenberg, but I think it's just because it's in early stages, but it doesn't support the markdown. It doesn't allow to create custom fields and custom meta boxes, which is super bummer. It's just like really annoying. And yes, because it's super new, there are basically like close to zero integrations, or I don't know about the learning curve, because it's starting, like I was looking at some tutorials or some like insights, and it feels like it adopts its own type of custom markup and custom actions in order to do something. Like you want to write the heading, you have to use this forward slash sort of like Slack style shortcuts in order to activate something. So I'm not sure about the learning curve about that, but it's definitely an interesting approach, and I'm so happy that we're moving away from the tiny MCE, which is terrible. It's always been terrible.
Yeah, me too. That thing's been around forever, and it's time for something new.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so talking about visual editors, one of the best that you can still use so far, and this is like a shameless plug for like ads, but it's a good segue, I guess. One of the best that you can use until Gutenberg is out, it's called Elementor. Have you ever tried Elementor?
I haven't tried it yet. No, I've seen you talk about it a few times, but
Yeah, you
I have
should
not tried
definitely.
it.
I have an affiliate link, so you should click on it and just like give it a try. There's a free version of it that it basically has everything. You can definitely do all the things that you want to do with a free version. The pro version has way more blocks, and it looks like the developers of Gutenberg looked at Elementor and said, oh, we want to do something like this for the core of WordPress, because it looks really similar in the way that it works and it acts. But you can literally build the entire pages, not just the content. And it's one of the, I'm not sure if it's the only one, but it's one of the few that it doesn't bloat your page with inline CSS or inline JavaScript every time you add a new block. Everything is compressed, is minified, and it loads external one CSS and one JavaScript, and that's it. It's just like super sweet, super good. So definitely give it a try. And that's it for the shameless plug for this episode. Hey, you gotta make money somewhere, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, the next topic of today is about Tailwind CSS, and you are probably the expert here because you're doing this super cool tutorial series on your newly opened YouTube channel about building a WordPress theme with Tailwind CSS. So what is Tailwind CSS? Tell us about it.
Yeah, Tailwind is a utility-based framework or CSS framework made by Adam Wathan and a few other guys, I think, contributed to it. And I was actually totally against it when I first heard him talking about making it. I was like, this is a stupid idea. Because when I first saw it, you look at these CSS classes that Tailwind generates for you, and they're things like text color and padding and margin and you put those in your HTML, and I was looking at it as, okay, you're just doing inline styles in a slightly different way. So my big complaint about that was like, okay, that's fine if you want to just do like a nice little code pin example of a cool card or a checkout box or something. But in real life, you're building large applications. If I want all the buttons to look the same and I want to change the border radius of my buttons, I have to go through my HTML and find every place I've put a button and all these classes and change it. But that's not actually the case. I finally actually sat down and read the docs, and you can compose your own components made up of these utilities. So it allows you to kind of prototype really quickly in the browser. You can just play with the HTML elements and add classes and get it to the way you want it to look. And then if you want to reuse that, you can just make a class called button, and you can apply those styles. And it's just a real easy and fast way to just kind of design in the browser.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. Like, it's a fast and easy way to design in the browser. That's a good way of saying it. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, the first reaction that I had was like, oh damn, they're copying my own approach, because I've been using like this utility first type of approach since the past 2 years or something. I don't know if you ever saw my AWS WordPress starter theme. I built in there my own custom SCSS framework that basically works the same. It's all based on mixings and repeaters that auto-generate your code based on arrays or variables or groups of data, and automatically the CSS gets spit out dynamically. So you don't actually have to write CSS. You just define a variable, and the script generates for you the variation of text color, background color, type of border, and blah, 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 based on your variables. And the thing that is changing, that it's kind of like challenging for users, especially like I feel like this approach is really good for experienced developers, but for new developers it's kind of like weird to do it that way, because there's this misconception that your HTML should have 1 or 2 classes and that's it, and you shouldn't have like 20 different classes in it. So since right now everyone was like writing, I don't know, a div, the class was the class header. So you go into your CSS, you write .header, and then you have this 35 line of CSS that to define the header, the background, the border, hover state, focus, and all this kind of stuff. Instead,
Right.
the approach is that you have a really small class declaration, for example, just BG white, that deals only with the background, and that's it. And then in your HTML, you have every element has its own list of classes that are all modular, that can all integrate and chat with each other and work with each other. And so your HTML actually looks really messy. I don't know if you agree with
Yes.
that. It looks really bloated.
It really does, yeah.
But it's not an issue, because it's not that it's gonna load slower your website. It's like, it's just HTML, it's just text. It loads like instantly. It's not that. But the thing that it helps a lot is just actually reading the CSS classes in your HTML. It's so eloquent, it's so easy to understand. Instead of having a class header or like header variation, you have BG white, item center, border radius, border rounded, overflow hidden. You have these classes that are like, they emulate the CSS declarations that they represent, which is, I think it's fantastic. So I really like it.
Yeah, and Tailwind is generated by a configuration file that runs post CSS. So it's CSS generated by JavaScript. So you can configure it. You can add your own colors if you want. For me, I have no design background, and I'm terrible with colors. So to be able to just use the default colors that come with it, for me, is perfect. But for someone who is like, I have this particular color I want to add in here, you can just go in there, add your variations for darker and lighter, and it'll automatically spit out the classes for you. It's really highly configurable. It's really cool to use.
Yeah, indeed. So one of the main complaints about Tailwind CSS was related to the file size, which is actually kind of like heavy, because I'm looking at the official documentation. In the file size, they say that Bootstrap is a 22 kilobyte, Foundation is 16 kilobytes, and instead, like Tailwind CSS, minified and gzipped, so super compressed, is 36 kilobytes, which is almost the double of Bootstrap. Like almost close to the double of Bootstrap. But do you have experience? Did you play with it in order to optimize it, or trying to shrink the file size?
I've done a little bit. Actually, my latest video that just came out Friday, at the end of the episode, I did do some modifications to it. The uncompressed, like standard CSS file it was generating for that project was, I believe, 280 kilobytes. And so by just removing all the colors that we're not using, that brought it down to, I think, 178 kilobytes.
Nice.
So, and then, there's a lot more that we can take out. We can minify and gzip it and everything. But, I mean, if you think about something like the color, like a color green, it's adding classes for background green, for border green, for text green, for, I mean, anything that could be green, it's creating classes for that. So just by removing and stripping out all those colors that we're not using, I mean, it almost halved the size.
Yeah.
So
yeah, definitely.
And there's definitely more things in there, like the margin sizes that you might not be using, or maybe you're not using certain screen widths. You can take those out. So out of the box, it is huge. It's very massive. So it's definitely a good idea to go through there and pick out the things that you actually want.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like, that kind of like helps with my arguments of saying like that this is not for new developers, because new developers, they don't want to edit things. Why? We all use Bootstrap because it's built, it's ready to go. You just put it in your website and that's it. You don't have to strip away things or edit the core files and stuff like that. But also that should be like a good approach. That should be the proper approach. If you don't use the JavaScript part of Bootstrap, you don't use the modals or the popover stuff like that, you should actually remove those, because those are really heavy. So I think people were expecting the same thing from Tailwind CSS, that you just have it pre-packaged and you just use it. You don't have to touch it and you just use the classes. Instead, the proper approach, as you said, is just edit the config file and remove the things that you don't use. Otherwise, it's kind of silly, like having 75 colors declarations if you just
Yeah.
use if you have like a website with 5 colors. So
Yeah, exactly. And the configuration file is actually really well documented. It's super easy to read. Everything's separated into nice big sections, and so it's really easy for you to just go in there and edit it.
yeah, I love it. This is my first time experience with post CSS. I never actually worked with it, and I kind of love it so far. It's just really, really fantastic, really intuitive.
Yeah, this is my first time messing with it as well, and you know, when I found out about Tailwind, and I was mad about the inline style thing, and then I was like, and now they're putting CSS and JavaScript. I was like, where are we? What is happening? Like,
Yes.
we had this whole separation of concerns. You know, you have your structure in your HTML, your styles in your CSS, and it's everywhere now. What's happening? But it makes sense when you really look at C and what Tailwind is doing with that configuration file and how it's generating all these classes for you, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's definitely cool. And the amazing thing is that it's super new. It's not even a year old, I guess, and it's a version 0.4, so it's still missing a lot of things. Like, you don't have any option for animations and transitions to customize those in the config file. It's just really static from that point of view. But it's built, and I love this part, it's built to accept custom modules. Look, you can build your own custom modules, and you can even use a shortcut like @apply to call pre-generated built-in classes, so you don't have to rewrite the same thing. If you want to use a color that you define in the config in your own custom modules, you can just call it dynamically without manually write it. And yeah, it's pretty great. It's like the community of developers just jumped on board immediately and add a lot of contributions and pull requests and issues reporting and stuff like that. So it's evolving really fast, and it's great.
Yeah, I think there's a website, I think it's called TailwindComponents.com or something along that line,
really?
where people are actually submitting like, you know, oh, you want a warning box, this is what it looks like, and here's the code for it, and you can just kind of grab that and use it in your site instead of, you know, having to come up with your own.
Oh man, I didn't know this. Oh yes, I'm looking at this site. I love it. Tailwind Components. Yes, this is beautiful. Oh yes, thank you, Chris. This is like the best thing ever. Look at that.
Oh yeah, you're welcome.
Yes,
okay. So yeah, if you want to come up with something cool and put it up there, I'm sure they'd love to have plenty of new components up there all the time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like if you build something really, really cool, like for example, the components for this transitions or some specific animations that are not in the base file, you can definitely do a pull request and have it integrated in the master branch, which I think it's great.
And that reminds me, there is something that is not part of Tailwind that I'm not sure if they're planning on adding it or not, because it's kind of easy to do on its own in CSS, and that's the new CSS Grid.
Yes, good segue.
Have you used the grids yet in CSS?
No, I followed a bunch of tutorials, and Wes Boss just released a free series of tutorial about CSS Grid, which is mind-blowing. But I haven't used it on production, just like playing with it and building small stuff, like small, the usual golden layout ratio with like header, sidebar, body, and then trying to reorder them dynamically on responsive. But I haven't integrated into a real project so far. What about you?
Yeah, I actually started learning it from Jeffrey Way, because he had a course on Laracast before Wes Boss came out with his. So, and I think Wes Boss's is quite a bit longer, maybe more in depth. But it was enough to get me started. And I played last weekend. I was building a little Laravel application, and I started using it, and it's so easy to use. It's really cool. I mean, you can set column sizes to give them a minimum, maximum. Like, you know, I want this column to never shrink smaller than 250 pixels, but I also don't want it to grow more than 50% of the page size. It's just really cool. It's like, how did we develop with just floats before, you know?
Oh man, yes, that's that's something that makes you think, like, who came up first with the approach? Because the CSS grid approach feels really natural and feels really like that's how it's supposed to be, because that's how our brain thinks in terms of organizing stuff on a surface, on a space grid. Instead, we came up with these columns and rows and float left, float right, and then all this kind of like weird stuff at the beginning for CSS styling is just like, and it was really complicated, but everyone adopted this approach. So no one thought about maybe a grid approach would be more intuitive.
Yeah, and I mean the tricks you'd have to do with, like, if you look at what Bootstrap does, or at least the older Bootstraps, I think the new one might be using grid. You have a row and it's got negative margins, and then the columns have positive margins to like make it look right, and it's just, it feels hacky.
Yeah, it's super hacky. Yeah, Bootstrap 4 right now, I think they stopped the development because CSS Grid became a thing. But Bootstrap 4 so far, it's in beta, and it uses Flexbox, which is like kind of like 2 years behind the rest. But yeah, one of the main issues when I work with junior developers, they always have, and they're using Bootstrap, they always have that horizontal scrolling of the page because they don't know how to properly use the container. So the negative margin of the columns, they mess up everything. It's like, this is a usual Bootstrap issue because the way it's built. So if you don't follow exactly the structure, it gives you that negative margin on the side. It's terrible.
Yeah. Oh yes, I remember getting stuck on that and just trying to figure out where is this extra 15 pixels coming from.
Exactly. Yeah. So what about browser compatibility with CSS Grid? I know that actually it was interesting. I saw a presentation that Internet Explorer was one of the first to adopt CSS Grid, but then they're not adopting the new conventions and the new markups of CSS Grid. So it's compatible, but not fully with new stuff, which is typical Microsoft approach.
Yeah. I think it's supported in Microsoft Edge though, right?
Yeah, it should be.
I think I saw, if for any newer developers that don't know, there's a great website called caniuse.com. And if you ever want to use something new like CSS Grid, you just go to that website, type in Grid, and it'll show you all the browsers and what it's compatible with. And I think CSS Grid is not compatible with Opera, but it is compatible with all the other modern browsers, Safari and Chrome.
What's the market share of Opera? Do you know that? Let me just a quick Google research. Opera browser 4%, which is okay. December 2017. Well, Microsoft Edge is 1.5%, which is it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I would have thought Edge would have been higher with all the Windows 10's computers, but
for desktop, for all browser, there's like a weird separation of like, there are a lot of like different statistics here, but an average of Internet Explorer and Edge together combined, there are like a 5%, which is interesting because all the auto compilers of your CSS or like prefixers and stuff like that, you have like the default settings is that don't add a prefix for browsers that are less than 5% of the market share. So Internet Explorer and Edge are not in there. Opera is higher. But interesting.
And I bet a lot of the Internet Explorer users are corporate users.
True.
I work for a very large company, and we have to support IE 11. Most people, I think all the computers have both IE and Chrome, but we have a lot of these extremely old applications that only work on IE for some reason.
God.
So yeah, it can be frustrating sometimes, especially even with like JavaScript performance. You'll test something in Chrome, and we're still using AngularJS. And it just flies in Chrome, and then you load it up on IE, and it's just crawling, and it's like, what is happening? Like, too many DOM elements,
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. No, it's terrible. yeah, we decided in our company to not support Internet Explorer. Like, we don't have the resources to invest on it. We don't support Microsoft. It's like a super brutal user experience thing. But if you access our website in Internet Explorer or Edge, like a giant banner opens up on top and said, hey, you should use a modern browser. It's like, not,
you shouldn't be using this crap.
Exactly. Like, do you like internet? So you should have like a better experience in it. It's like, it's terrible, but yeah, we don't want to support that. So yeah, CSS Grid, definitely. I don't know if for sure, like for new user, this is kind of like one of the weird technologies that it's so easy for new developers, for junior developers, because their brain is not solidified on the old concept of columns and negative margins and flexbox and stuff like that. But for all really old developers, I saw the struggle on it. Like, I talked with some friends that they have like 10 plus years of experience with CSS Grid. It's like, no, I don't like it. I prefer the usual row and column and floats. Just like, come on, man. Just jump.
And floats are just so finicky. Like, I don't know. They can cause so many issues if you don't have a clear fix, and you know.
Yeah, it's terrible. And there's the classic example is that if you wanna fully make your UI responsive properly, you're gonna end up sooner or later to have duplication. I also remember when I started at a company, I'm not gonna say the name because I don't want to shit on them, but when I started at a company, they had 3 different menus components. Like, they have a menu for mobile and a menu for tablet and a menu for desktop, because the developer didn't know how to properly use or Flexbox or CSS Grid in order to make it fully responsive. So they had, I don't know, 20 pages, so almost 60 templates for those 20 pages, because everything was separated. They had literally the name of the template, then .mobile.php. I was like, what the hell is this?
Wow.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I know when smartphones first kind of came out, a lot of websites, you would, if it was like facebook.com, the phone would take you to m.facebook.com.
Yes.
You're like a completely separate website that they had to build.
When you were trying to share the link with someone and you were sharing the M dot, they were accessing the mobile version on desktop. It was looking like, what the hell is this? Like, it looks horrible. Yeah, that's, good times, man. Yeah. Something else about CSS Grid? Do you have like, other than Laracast, did you follow other tutorials or something else that you could recommend?
I believe there's I also recommend this for Flexbox. There's some cheat sheets on CSSTricks.com.
Yes.
The Flexbox cheat sheet, I use Flexbox a lot, and I always go to that page because I can never remember how do you align the children, you know. And they have one for CSS Grid as well, and it goes into details on like each setting, you know, and how is it going to affect the layout and things like that. So CSSTricks.com is just a great site in general for web development and styling. Yeah,
that's perfect. I always have those important pages. I don't know, like this is like something like shameful for me, but whenever I have to do like pseudo element, like a triangle, I always go to that page, and that page on CSS Tricks shows like how to do a pseudo element triangle and arrow top, arrow bottom, or it's just always, I've been doing that for many years. I can never remember how to do it. Just copy paste that code. Something that,
and that's definitely a note to take home for junior developers. Like, don't worry about memorizing this stuff. Like, we've Alex and I have both been doing this for a long time, and I mean, I'm a professional Googler. Like,
no, it's like that. Yeah, I have actually a lot of comments on my videos are like, how do you remember this thing? Or like, this is getting frustrated because I follow like 5 videos and I cannot remember the things that I did in the first video. And I'm like, it's normal. Like, before doing a tutorial, I open the documentation and I just read it while I'm doing the tutorials. I'm just like, after 10 plus years of development, I just know how to Google things to find them because I know those keywords and I know what I'm looking for, but I don't remember the code by hand. Like, it's insane. You can remember HTML, you can remember, CSS declarations. Those are kind of simple, but Even when I'm working in Laravel, and I've been working in Laravel for like 3 years, even now when I have to build a controller and create a middleware, I always open the documentation because I don't remember everything.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's and like we were talking earlier, how fast this stuff changes. There's something new out every day. So
yeah. Random question: Do you feel like, and that's a personal thing, like, do you feel like the term LTS, like long-term support, doesn't make sense anymore these days?
In a way, yeah. I mean, Laravel, I think 5.5 is the new LTS, right?
Yeah, and it was like 5.4 before, and then Taylor Otwell decided, no, I'm gonna actually do 5.5.
Yeah, yeah. I know they're working on 5.6, which I'm sure will be released right around the time of Laracon US, which is in June, I believe.
Yes, it's in June, correct. Are you gonna attend?
So yes, I'm actually attending this year. I was supposed to go last year, but we were swamped with work, and they said we couldn't go. But yeah, this year, myself and my architect are going up to Chicago to attend.
Oh, beautiful.
So I'm planning on recording some of the events and making a video on just kind of seeing all the cool stuff that's going on up there, and I think it's gonna be a really fun conference.
Do it, absolutely. I would have loved to attend, but for personal reason I can't. I'm just like super busy. I cannot take a lot of time, so I bought like the online tickets, and I'm gonna stream it at work and then during that morning. But yeah, it's fantastic. It's actually like pretty great what Taylor Otwell was able to achieve with a PHP framework that he built for himself, basically.
Yeah, I actually I had lunch with him when I started working in this Laravel position, because my job is headquartered in Little Rock, which is near where he lives.
Oh, nice.
And the guy I work with just happens to be like buddies with him. So,
no
so we had
way.
lunch, and Taylor's an awesome guy. I felt bad I didn't really have any questions for him because this was my first week on the job. I've been watching Laracast for like a week. So I was like, I don't really know Laravel. I'm not gonna.
I don't know what I'm doing here. Like, let's have lunch.
But yeah, he's a great guy, and I mean, he's built an amazing framework.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic, and I always, I think it's funny, but it's not funny for him. But I always like reading his blog posts when he talks about his experience with really old developers that they constantly bash on Laravel and his approach, and every time he was trying to basically appeal to them, like the early years of Laravel, it was like building a thing and everyone's like, okay, yeah, you did the thing, it's cool, but what about this other thing? You forgot to put this, or why you're not doing this, why you're not doing that. So he was always trying to make them happy, and then he decided, why? Like, I want this to be light and easy and modern. Do you remember that backlash of like the type hinting thing? I don't know if you follow that thing.
I don't remember that one, no.
There was what was the name of the video in Laracast that actually Jeffrey Wade did, like the visual depth, a video about visual depth, where he basically started with a file that was like plain and simple and typical object-oriented in PHP, where you have all the type hinting, all the declaration, you have an interface for your class, you have the construct that redeclares the same variable, like really strict type of quote-unquote old school PHP. And he started talking about visual depth. It's like, you don't really, like, if you're passing just a string to your method, you don't need to type in this is a string, because it's just a string and it only can be a string. So you can remove that. If your class is really simple, you don't need an interface if you reuse that class multiple times, or that interface multiple times, stuff like that. So he basically removed all the extra things that really old Java developers love, because in Java, if you don't type in everything, Java won't work. Instead, in PHP, you can avoid to do type in thing. And that, I don't know, that triggered a massive backlash from a lot of developers, especially on Reddit. And they started like insulting each other, and it wasn't nice. It was really bad.
Yeah, I know a lot of PHP or like Symfony or just procedural PHP developers just hate Laravel, and I don't understand it. I mean, it's so much easier to use. Like
Yeah.
the documentation is clean. The code you write in Laravel is just easy to read. I've really enjoyed it. I came from a .NET background, and there's a lot of similarities. I think he did take a lot of ideas from .NET and probably Ruby on Rails as well.
Oh yeah, Ruby on Rails, definitely.
But it's, you can look at Laravel, it just makes sense,
Yeah, true, indeed. Definitely. And it gives you like the ability to do a lot of things, and it's really solid. Like, I love how solid it is, and how it makes sense to look at the structure. Well, whatever. These old shoes that we are so we're so young and free. No, we're not. Okay. So the last topic of today is about it's not really about hosting providers, but it's more about like cloud servers versus hosting providers and stuff like that. So first of all, which do you like? You have your own personal website that is chrisperko.net, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Is that on which provider, which server?
That is on DigitalOcean. So I switched to DigitalOcean probably 3 years ago, maybe. Before that, I was using, I'm not going to say the name, but like a shared hosting provider, and they were good for a while. And they got bought up by like this mega hosting corporation.
I know what you're talking about.
The service just went to crap. One day I logged in because I got an invoice for like $200.
Wow.
I logged in and realized that somebody had used my account to stand up like a virtual private server that was costing tons of money. And it took like 6 weeks to get somebody to remove that from my account. It was ridiculous. So at that time, a buddy of mine, we were kind of co-working on this like iOS Android app that was, ended up failing, but it was a lot of fun. And he was using DigitalOcean, and so I got on there and started using it. And so I now have 2 droplets I'm using. I've got one that has my personal site and a couple other like WordPress things that I'm working on with some friends. And then I've got another one that I've got, I think, Laravel, three Laravel sites running on. And I've been using Laravel Forge because DigitalOcean, it's cheap. Like, you can get a droplet for $5, and it's like 1 gig of RAM, CPU and everything, 20 gigs of storage, but it's just a Linux box. So, if you want to stand up WordPress I think WordPress, I think they have a one-click install. But for like Laravel, you really have to know like, okay, Nginx or Apache. And you have to get all that set up. So Laravel Forge seemed expensive at first, but I've been using it for a few months, and it's so easy to be like, hey, here's my new domain, create a Laravel site on this server or stand up a new server. And it just gets PHP installed with the latest version. It's just so easy to use. I've really enjoyed it.
And how do you manage your domain names? Because I don't think DigitalOcean has a domain name provider, right?
Right. I was using my old hosting provider, but after all that, I switched. I'm using Google. I think they charge like $1 or $2 more a year for a domain, but I like that it's hooked up because I've got an email address that's associated with chrisperko.net, and I kind of use it as like my tax write-off. Like, that's my business email. So since it's part of Google, I just have it all in one place. Like, here's my domains that I've paid for this year.
Interesting.
And their service is fast. It's easy. The DNS, I mean, you'll hook up a website, and it seems like in less than an hour you can go to that URL without needing to change your host file in it.
That's the thing with like regular hosting providers. You change the DNS, and it's like, oh, just give us up to 48 hours to update the DNS. What? I was like, how is that possible? It's just like, it should be automated. Is that literally like a guy that goes in the server, unplugs an Ethernet port, and just plug it back somewhere else? What is happening? Like, it's insane.
And DigitalOcean, I've only had my droplets go down, I think, twice in the 3 or so years I've had them, and both times they alerted me ahead of time saying like, hey, we need to take down the racks in this data center for a short network maintenance or whatever.
Nice.
And I never even really noticed it, but they told me ahead of time that was going to happen. They told me after that what they did. Um, I just, I don't know. I've never had anything bad to say about them.
Nice, that's good. Yeah, so I'm thinking to switch to DigitalOcean. Right now I'm on AWS. Actually, like personally, my personal website is a Media Temple, which I love it. It's kind of expensive. It's $20 a month for the basic shared type of thing, but the good thing is that I went with Media Temple and not with all these other like hosting providers are super crappy. Even if they're cheaper, is that Media Temple has built-in domain name registration in it in the price, and with your shared hosting, you have SSH access to your shared server, which is like a sort of like sandboxed standalone version of this share. So you can actually install things. I can run Composer, I can run stuff like that in the browser, in the server, and also I have the ability to register as like an infinite amount of subdomains in that domain name directly inside the server, and there's like a 0 seconds configuration for the DNS to be activated, which is great. And their support, I think, is one of the best ever. Like I can literally call them and they answered immediately. And I had an issue with them just once in 4 years, and they solved it in less than an hour. It was like fantastic. So Media Temple is one, if you like, for users, if you have to go with a hosting provider because you don't want to deal with installing things by yourself or managing your server or checking all these weird DevOps stuff, just go with Media Temple. I wouldn't recommend anyone else. But it's a bit expensive, especially for my personal website that doesn't get a lot of traffic. So for work, I use AWS because it's like a sort of enterprise type of approach, and AWS, the Amazon Web Services, they have more things than DigitalOcean, unfortunately.
Yes,
they're
they do.
like massive, and they have also built-in artificial intelligence APIs, and I can schedule so many things with that. They have like a built-in budgeting system and wallet, and it's just like too many things. It's not replaceable for an enterprise point of view. And for like my forum subdomain, forum.alecat.com, is on EC2 instance of AWS for my personal account. And for the small amount of traffic that I get, I actually pay 17 cents a month, which is nothing.
Oh, wow.
And I can play with it. I have full SSH access. I install things. Every time there's a new software that I want to try, a new CMS, I install it there. I boot up an EC2 micro instance, which is free for a year. I test it and I put it down, and I have only 5 gigabytes of storage with that. But yeah, so a little bit of background, like both AWS and DigitalOcean are services that you pay as you go. So it's not like a regular hosting provider that you pay a prefixed amount of money per month, and then it doesn't matter how much you use it. If you don't use it at all, or if you use it a lot, you still pay that amount of money. Instead, with AWS and DigitalOcean, you start with a fixed price that is really, really low. And if you use it more, you pay more. If you use it less, you pay less. So it adapts based on the usage of your service, which is, I think it's great for when you're starting something, because maybe you don't have the cash up front to afford like a more expensive hosting provider, even if it has everything. And these services, they give you full access to your server, so you can actually, yeah, you can have fun with it, like go nuts and install everything you want.
Yeah, and like DigitalOcean, like the first droplet, I was saying it only has like 20 gigs of hard drive space, and for $5 a month, maybe you don't need more than that. But let's say you have an application that does need more space. They have these blocks of hard drive space that you can purchase extra each month to add onto it.
Yeah.
And same thing with like a $5 server is not going to handle a ton of traffic, but starting out you don't have much. But let's say your website goes crazy and you get tons of traffic, you can just up the size of the droplet. You're like, oh, I want to pay $20 a month to have 2 cores and 4 gigs of RAM or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So it's really cool to be able to start cheap and expand as you need it.
Yeah, exactly. Do you have on DigitalOcean the option to autoscale, set up on autoscaling without you managing that thing?
I'm not sure if there is a way, but they do have a web API, so you could probably easily build something, or someone probably has something out there already.
Yeah. Yeah, something that I love about AWS, you can set an automatic alert and see if your CPU or bandwidth spikes for reaching almost the limit of your instance. You can automatically set an auto scaling and say okay, just increase, and it doesn't matter. It manages everything automatically, boots up another instance and hooks it up, and it's really fantastic. Which I remember on a previous, a funny story on a previous work that I had. I was working with lead developer that I don't know what the hell it was doing, but basically the client, every time we were managing this really massive e-commerce site for a really big client, and every time they were releasing a new offer, a new promo code via email marketing and stuff like that, they were calling the developer, say, hey, we're gonna release these tomorrow, so probably we're gonna have more traffic on the website. And he was like, okay, I'm gonna boot up more instances to allow the handling the spike in traffic, and everything was done manually. I was like, do you know you can do it automatically? It's you don't have to turn off stuff once every 2 days. Yeah, which is super convenient. But yeah, so I'm thinking to switch my my personal website from Media Temple to DigitalOcean, but just because the Media Temple, I bought it almost 7 years ago, when I thought okay, my website, I want to make it bigger, I want to make it gigantic and all this kind of stuff. Instead, now it's just a simple blog that I don't use that often. So probably is the best solution.
Yeah, and I mean, the great thing about it is it's the $5 droplet, it says there it's 0.015 cents an hour.
Yeah.
So it maxes out at $5 a month, but if you only want to use it for a few days to try it out, you're out 30 cents or whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. You can literally boot it up and use it for a weekend to develop your thing, and then on Sunday night you just shut it down and that's it. You pay those 30 cents, whatever it's gonna cost you, exactly. 48 cents for 48 hours or stuff. So yeah, it's definitely is developer, this is a sort of a freelance developer approach first. It's for small developers that they want to test something and want to tinker. Do you think it's gonna grow? Because I know they just released Spaces that is basically identical to S3 of AWS, which is a virtual SSD that you can, an SSD on the cloud, not virtual, sorry. An SSD on the cloud where you can upload all your data. Do you think they're gonna try to expand and have similar services to Microsoft Azure or AWS, or you think they're gonna focus on small developers?
I really hope so. I've seen them add features here and there over the years, and I mean, when I started with them, I think they only had data centers in New York and San Francisco, and now they've got them in, I think, India, Germany, UK.
Nice.
I'm not sure if they have any in Asia, but I think they've grown quite a bit. So I imagine that they'll, push to compete more with Azure and AWS and everything.
A final question about this. Have you ever tried Google Cloud?
Kind of.
Yeah, me too. Same as kind of.
I have a Laravel application that I'm using Google's cloud storage for image hosting, basically. There's no traffic on that site, so it doesn't cost me anything. Yeah, I used it because for some reason I was building this Laravel application and I wanted to use AWS, and I could not get the cloud storage thing to connect. I don't know why. I tried so many times, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna try Google, and it worked. So I just stuck with them.
Yes, for Laravel, we had the same problem. You need to set up service provider that hooks to CloudFront in order to stream whatever file you have on your like, S3 bucket. That is like the SSD.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like a 3-step process basically. Just because all the stuff, all your files in the S3 bucket are not publicly accessible outside your domain, your like the built-in domain or the built-in IP address of your EC2 instance. So if you try to call them from within another website or that is not hosted in an EC2 instance in the same server in the same region of your S3 buckets, for security reason they don't allow you to it, but you have this bridge that is the CloudFront connection, and there's like a service API for Laravel that allows you to do that. But yeah, it was really frustrating at the beginning as well. Like, why the hell I cannot access my own images?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, it was quite frustrating.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, basically we are at the end of this lovely episode, which I had a lot of fun talking with you, and it was great. It was great.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Okay, so where people can find you if they want to find you online and insult you and say like, you're too smart, I hate you, and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Chris J Perko. Don't forget the J. There's another Chris Perko out there.
But he's a liar and he's not.
Yeah,
it's not the original one.
Yeah, and then yeah, I've got a YouTube channel. You can just search for Chris Perko. I'm sure you'll find me. I don't think there's any other Chris Perkos doing YouTube right now. So.
Which is great because you need just one that is the best.
Yes, and then my website is chrisperko.net.
Awesome. And what are you planning to do on your YouTube channel? I know you just started it. So.
Yeah, so I'm gonna finish this Tailwind and underscores, building a basic WordPress theme. I'm planning on doing some more like introduction videos to like animating things on the web, like starting out with like CSS transitions, moving into transforms and animations, and then getting into more like SVG and Canvas stuff.
Oh, nice.
And then I'd like to start doing some vlogs. I kind of feel funny just talking to a camera, but
oh yeah, well, welcome to the club. Like my first videos were like, oh my god, I'm so awful.
So yeah, just general web development stuff, and just kind of what people are interested in. I'd like to see some feedback, some comments on what people want to see, what maybe I'm not explaining well, and yeah, just kind of whatever seems interesting.
Well, you're already like many steps ahead of me, because like my first tutorial series were people commenting out like, hey, you're pronouncing this word wrong, and like, hey, no, that's not how it works. So that's so.
I think you said you started your YouTube channel to help you learn English, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I had issues with English, especially from a technical point of view, and I was struggling at work. So I had my dead YouTube channel, then I wasn't using it. I decided to record these videos to put them online and being able to listen to myself. The first video that I published was also private for like the first week or two because I didn't think was good enough. And then I said, okay, I don't care. It's just like, let's put it public. Let's see. And actually I had a huge positive feedback, especially I think because the majority of my audience is from non-English speaking countries. And the fact that I speak with that thick Italian accent and I don't speak perfect English, it's strangely easier for them to understand me than a native English speaker, because I speak really slowly and I say wrong words, so they can relate to it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, learning a second language is very difficult. I know a little bit of Spanish, not much. Nice. I'm married into a Hispanic family, so it's not easy learning another language.
Oh, it's terrible, especially like having like a real conversation during a job interview or like during a meeting with a client that doesn't understand servers and why you're offering that at that specific price, and you have to justify your things like, oh my god, help me. It's like, that was terrible. But yeah, that that turned out to be great. So yeah. Okay, well, good luck with your YouTube channel. I will be sure to put all your links in the description below, so you can click and stalk Chris online. Just follow him on YouTube. He's doing a great series on Tailwind, which I love it, and it just started, so give it a good shake, especially with these super stupid things that YouTube did about monetization, that you cannot monetize below 1,000 subscribers, which is stupid. But yeah, just be sure to subscribe to the channel, and of course the Nerd Continuity is available on YouTube, on iTunes, and all the other RSS feed related podcasts. Check the links for the sponsor in the description, like Elementor and NordVPN. Thank you so much for listening to these two crazy guys talking about technology shenanigans, and I talk to you in the next tutorials or whatever is gonna happen in a couple of days. Bye guys. Do you want to say bye?
Oh, yep, bye.
Okay.